Vegan Royal Princesses Attack!
Hey everyone, welcome to Vegan Warrior Princesses Attack. I'm Nicole.
And I'm Callie.
And today we'll be talking about...
We are finally tackling an issue we've wanted to for a very long time. Universal basic income.
Woohoo!
Yes.
Yes, we have...
Which side are we going to fall on?
Oh, I wonder. If you're anything but a first-time listener, I hope that you know.
Right.
Yes, we're very excited to talk about this today. We're going to try to tackle some of the nuances and, give all sides to the topic a bit. Not all opinions, but just,
Gotcha.
everything that's come out of the research that has been done. And, of course, add our own tangents and rants and thoughts and opinions as y'all hopefully come here to hear.
Yeah.
But first, Callie's got some news.
Yes. First up today is reported by VegNews. It says grass is running out for grass-fed beef, dated January 18th, 2018. Why is that so funny? Your reaction was so immediate. I love it.
I don't know why, but that headline tickled the fuck out of me.
It did.
I don't know why. It's just kind of like, yeah, omnivores, what now?
Right? Oh, gosh. I don't know. This episode's going to be interesting. We're like off to a great start.
Yeah.
Okay. High demand for what consumers...
Sustainable my fucking ass.
Right? High demand for what consumers think is healthier cow meat, along with climate change, is creating a shortage in nutritious grass. A report recently published by NPR highlighted the research of ecologist Joseph Crane, who poses that the rising demand for grass-fed beef is contributing to the loss of nutrient-dense grass. I mean, anyone who has seen Cowspiracy is probably not going to be shocked by this.
True.
But NPR revealed that the sales of grass-fed beef have increased from 17 million in 2012 to, are you ready for it?
No.
272 million in 2016. That's only 4 years. 17 million to 272 million.
Okay.
That is shocking.
So this goes to prove my point of our speech, right?
Right.
Of how we talked about how consumerist veganism doesn't work because we think that demand's going down, but it's not.
Right.
And a lot of vegan issues are interpreted this way where people think that this is a solution. That's why the demand's gone up so much, is because as we're spreading information, people are like, oh, I'll just buy grass-fed beef and that'll fix the problem.
I know. I hate when I see environmentalists posting about grass-fed beef. I'm like, it's way worse for the environment.
It's way worse. I know. And the cows still go through horrible, because they still usually go for like 6 months to get fattened up. So they end up in the same place. And then they are slaughtered in the same way. And they're still killed for food. So it's like you didn't actually solve
it's not any better.
any of the problems. Right.
So protein quality of the grasses on which these cows feed have dropped by 20% since the mid-1990s due to several factors, including the rise of carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere. Pretty soon, Crane said, you're at the point where the protein concentrations are too low for too long a period for the animals to gain any weight. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I know obviously this isn't really like a vegan story necessarily, because clearly we're not in favor of like grass-fed meat, and our concern is not that the cows are able to like get fat enough for slaughter.
Right.
But I think this just points out that when we talk in half measures, when we share information about things, we have to be really clear about what the end goal is too, because people started this campaign for grass-fed beef that it's like more humane, but it is causing all kinds of problems down the road. You know, namely that it's way worse for the environment and that you're not actually saving the cows from suffering. So it's like, great. This
Great.
did not do anything good.
Yeah. And it's good information to have when people bring up, because people bring up grass-fed beef to me all the fucking time.
Oh, yeah.
Which is so annoying. But also, again, just another good push to have your veganism be as much a radical political stance as possible that's based on ethics and the belief of animal liberation, because when you're kind of pushing it on that platform, there's no solution except to stop exploiting animals.
Yes, girl.
I'm like, no one can see what I'm doing, but I'm doing a thing with my head.
Right. And hand.
And
it's
hand.
very clear.
Yes.
Your point is very
I just
clear.
can't wait for us to have a YouTube channel someday.
So someone can see all
my
our
nonverbal
listeners
communication.
can see all your mannerisms. Yes, I know.
Sometimes I speak only with my hands because I can't find the word, and I like draw it out, and people usually get what I'm saying. So I'm like, I can't wait to be on video for people.
I know. Well, I'm just so lucky that I get to see them all.
It's true. And then you always interpret for me, which is really nice. Or you narrate my gestures. You're like, and now she's pointing very violently at me.
Well,
I don't know
feel
what
like
I
it's
did,
a
but
crucial piece of the story that our listeners are missing out on.
I know.
And I just don't want them to think that I like laugh at things that like they don't like. I just am constantly
Just
laughing
dead silence,
at things.
and you're just laughing.
Yeah, and they're like, "What is wrong with that person?" I'm just like, "No, you don't know what she is doing right now. That's making me laugh."
Yes.
Okay,
Moving on.
Yes, moving on. Our next story is on plantbasednews.org. It says major meat producer Cargill invests in pea protein to accelerate production. This is dated January 19th, 2018. A wave of meat producers have pumped cash into plant-based businesses recently. Meat giant Cargill has invested in pea protein brand Puris. It's Puris, all capital. So I don't know if it's like a word that you say or like just the letters. So I gave it both ways.
Those always mess me up.
Right? I'm like, why are you capitalizing everything? Anyway, in an attempt to accelerate a new wave of sustainable plant-based foods, acknowledging the rapid rise in consumer demand for plant-based protein, Cargill wants to expand into the sector. David Henstrom, Vice President, Cargill Starches, Sweeteners, and Texturizers, said, Puris is a game changer in terms of taste and vertical integration in pea protein. Okay, this fucking guy did not just say vertical integration.
Oh, he surely did.
You know what's funny? I was literally just watching a rerun of 30 Rock, because if you haven't heard me mention it before, that's one of my favorite shows. And Jack Donaghy was talking about vertical integration. He was like explaining it to Liz Lemon, which was so funny. His example was if like the company that sold her favorite chips also sold like anti-diarrhea medicine. And she was like, oh no, that's terrible. Then they can make their chips worse so that you have to buy more of the medication. He's like, now you get it. Like in a good way.
Right. Like he's all happy about it.
Right. So, quote, Cargill is excited to expand into the emerging pea protein space while continuing to support our conventional agriculture crops. Wah, wah. So, pea protein.
The pea protein space.
Yeah. It's becoming quite a big thing. Isn't that what most of like the mock chicken meat is made out of, pea protein? Like, isn't it like Veggie Girls meats, I feel like, pea protein?
Yeah, I think so.
I think that sounds right to
and
me.
I think that's probably the most popular for like protein shakes and stuff, protein powders and stuff. Yeah.
And like Beyond Meat.
Yeah, Beyond Meat for sure.
Yeah.
Uses that. Yeah.
So next up in news is something a little bit different than the type of stories we talk about, but we had promised you months ago that we would have an update for you all. So if you remember, we did an episode with Molly Woodstock of the Smash Everything podcast. Molly announced on that episode we're talking about gender, and Molly revealed that they were going to be coming out with a new podcast called Gender Reveal, and dun da da da, it's officially out there now.
Woohoo!
So you can go check out Gender Reveal on, the platform that you usually use to get podcasts. We are so excited to support Molly's work. They are just doing incredible things and having really important conversations about gender. Molly was just actually on what we found out is the very last episode for now of our friend Lacey Davis's podcast, Flex Your Heart Radio. They did an episode together, and gender was something that came up, and they both just had, of course, incredible things to say about all kinds of different topics, but they definitely talked about gender too, and it was incredibly fascinating. So we definitely encourage you to go check out Gender Reveal, and we have a little teaser to play for you.
Isn't gender the same thing as sex?
How does somebody know what gender they are?
What the fuck is gender?
What if another person is saying someone's pronouns wrong and you've tried to correct them before, but they just don't get it? Then what do you do?
Yell them and say, "Don't do that!"
Why do you think people, especially TERFs, try to use science to incorrectly proclaim that there are only two genders?
They, them, plural
Is
pronouns?
transgender the same as transsexual?
Am I allowed to just pick my gender?
What does cisgender mean?
Is gender real?
Is gender even real?
Honestly, what even is gender?
Welcome to Gender Reveal, a podcast where we ask intrusive personal questions and try to get a little bit closer to figuring out what the hell gender is. We're going to talk to non-binary folks, binary trans folks, queer folks, gender non-conforming folks, activists, authors, artists, educators, and anyone else who thinks way too much about this stuff. So subscribe now, and we'll be back in your feeds with full episodes real soon.
You guys, what even is gender?
So doesn't that sound amazing?
It sounds great. I cannot wait to listen to it.
I know, me either. And this is a great way. I mean, we've talked before on this show, and I know there's a lot of anxiety, I think, right now out in the world about gender and what does it mean, especially for people like Nicole and I and our listeners out there who are trying to deconstruct a lot of these systems of oppressions, and we want to be very open and understanding and supportive of people that are maybe gender nonconforming, or are really even the people who are binary but are trying to question what it means to be a certain gender. So this is a great resource for you to listen and learn about things without expecting someone who is not willing to do the emotional labor to educate you to have to educate you, right? Mm-hmm. So we definitely recommend checking it out. And
Absolutely.
Congratulations, Molly, on your new show.
Yeah, congrats, Molly.
And lastly, we have some very exciting news for us and a new thing that we are going to be doing. We have mentioned it before, but we want to make an official announcement that we are going to start doing a quarterly online book club. Woo! Woo! We're so excited about this. As Nicole has mentioned in the past, and I think I've mentioned it as part of my vegan story, but a book club, Nicole's book club actually, was what radicalized me to going from someone who was a health vegan. I mean, maybe I wouldn't even use the term health vegan. I was mostly just eating plant-based for a diet. So it took me from that into
this,
the radical person.
The woman in front of you today.
Yes.
The woman all up in your earbuds.
Right. So books are incredibly important to us. They've been a huge part of our journey, and we just really see the value in reading, expanding our minds, and having discussions about them with people in your community.
Yeah, our main purposes for having the show are basically helping to radicalize people.
Yes.
I mean, opening
real,
not in a forceful way, but presenting information in a way that's entertaining so that people can become more radicalized in their views without feeling threatened or challenged, without feeling threatened or like they're in some kind of debate or their own personal value as a human is being challenged, and also to build community. And I just think that having a book club is sort of all of those things in one space. There's something incredibly bonding about reading a book that makes you have really big thoughts and then being able to talk about it with other people who are also very impassioned about what they read. So we're super excited to add this to our brand of activism and to our offerings, and we just can't wait to connect with the people who show up in this more intimate way.
Yeah. So the first book that we're going to be reading is actually a 2-for-1. We're going to do 2 books in the first one. We're going to be doing Ishmael and My Ishmael, both by Daniel Quinn. And the reason we're doing 2 is because they're very short, quick reads, and also they tie in very well with each other and the type of conversation that we would want to have. I feel like Ishmael was an incredibly important book to me. It was one of the books we did in Nicole's book club early on in my vegan journey, and hearing more about My Ishmael and how that really ties into a lot of the stuff that we talk about on the show and has been very crucial to Nicole's development and understanding of certain things. And you've maybe gotten hints of things that we've said on the show that have actually come out of My Ishmael that we've been asked about. So we're really excited to...
Like, they locked up the food. One of my signature...
that is your signature thing.
Yeah.
And that comes from these books. So we're very excited to read them. The way it's going to work is it's going to be an online book club. We're going to sell tickets to them because we want to make sure that we kind of control how many people are in the groups so that it's not just like, so many people that you're not actually getting to share and contribute and feel like you're really a part of the conversation. It's going to be $25 to participate in the book club. We're planning on doing it once a quarter right now. So we're going to announce the books usually 2 months, if not 3 months before the next book club to give people time to read. And then, we'll offer links to how it's all going to work. So we don't quite have those details nailed down yet, but we definitely wanted to make sure we were giving you all enough time to get your hands on the books and start reading them so that you were ready for the discussion. And then probably our episode in the first week of February, we'll have more details for you about how to sign up and how it's all going to work, the more logistics part of the event.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I wanted to take a moment to promote our online book club. We have, in the VWPA Society, we created kind of a subgroup that's called the VWPA Book Club, which you can find recommended at the top of the VWPA Society. Or you can just go on Facebook and search for VWPA Book Club. I highly recommend joining that because I think as we really build out these book clubs and as this becomes more of a thing, that will be probably our main hub for communicating. We would love to do stuff in there like take polls for books that you all want to read for upcoming events. And also, as always, we always want to bear in mind accessibility. And so we know $25 probably is not accessible for a lot of people. So within the book club, for the books that we read, for the online conference group, we're also going to start a thread in the book club that anybody can participate in for free. It won't be the same as getting to talk, on video face to face or having the live chat, but at least you'll still be able to reach out to people and kind of build that community and still feel included in the discussion. So anyone who's interested, if you haven't already, I would just say go join over there. And then that would help us build a nice solid base of readers who are interested and then give you all a voice in some of the stuff that we're going to do next.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're so excited about this.
I'm so excited. And it's going to be really good. We're going to plan it out really well. We're going to have a nice structured conversation. We're going to make sure that, people get a chance to speak. We don't really want it to be us doing yet another lecture. We really want this to be all of you able to come in and have an open conversation with other people, us included, about something that you read. Because really that is where I personally have found the most personal growth and connection with other people, and we just really want to facilitate that for as many of you as we can.
Yeah. And it's going to give us the opportunity to have different types of conversations than we do on the show. We've already got several books that we are excited to do, waiting for each quarter. I think it's going to be challenging because there's so many awesome books out there. A book that we plan on reading this year is Beasts of Burden, which is a book about the connection between, animal rights issues and ableism, and trying to really understand those tie-ins together and the intersectionality that occurs there. We also, of course, want to do Afroisms. How could we not?
Right.
And when we're able to, we'd really like to bring in like the authors of some of these books for some of the conversations. So like if someone comes out with a new book and we're able to cover that for one of the book clubs, like we may be able to get the author involved in the events.
Yep.
So,
yeah, we're hoping if we can make these successful and then be able to go to an author and show, hey, we can get people to turn out. We would really love to start doing that and give you access directly to the author to discuss some ideas that came up for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that'd be super fun.
Yes.
All right. So anyway, super excited.
Yes.
Can't wait. And just like, if you ever want to message us, let us know that you're just interested so we can kind of figure out if this is going to be a thing. That's cool. But you can also just wait for us to have more details in a place for where you can reserve your seat in the next couple weeks.
Yes.
Yeah. So Callie.
Yes.
I have a joke that I think is probably as bad as the one last week. Although, in my defense, did you see that we got a message of someone saying they almost fell off their ladder laughing so hard at my Lifesavers joke?
I did see that, yes.
That was very validating for me.
Well, I'm happy that it was validating to you, and I'm happy that our listener did not hurt themselves.
I'm very happy about that. I would have felt terrible.
Also, how
if they broke
ironic.
their butt on that silly joke.
Well, also a lifesaver joke. And then you
I
injure
didn't even
yourself.
think of that. Callie, you just made a pun. You made a very dad-like pun. It's spreading! Finally!
Oh, goodness.
Yep. So first, I want to have a PSA to say if you're on a ladder right now, get in a good place. And then since we're doing a show that's going to involve a lot of numbers and dollars and facts and figures, I want to say, Callie, yes. What kind of ant can count?
I don't know.
An account ant. It's so stupid. But I can't say that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well done.
Thanks. It's like they literally just arranged the words. It's like not even, it like is clever, but it's like not clever at all.
Right.
But it like tickles me.
I can see that. Ooh, I'm glad you get so much enjoyment out of these.
I really do.
Yeah.
There's a weird kind of joy that comes out of telling these jokes that does not come out of hearing them. That I've realized.
That's very accurate.
Yeah.
It's like quite astute of you.
I know.
Although some of our listeners do get a ton of enjoyment.
Which fills me with joy.
Yeah.
The greatest of all the joys. But anyway. I want to say thank you to our new Patreon pledges. We had a kind of rush of them come in this week, which was super cool. So Kelly, Junior, and Vanessa, thank you so much for being new sponsors of the show. You can go to patreon.com/VWPA if you want to hear more amazing jokes like the one I just told. So you can keep us going in perpetuity. The money means a lot to us, and it really helps us be able to take opportunities to speak and spread the word and grow the show and buy equipment. So it's extremely helpful for us. And maybe, who knows, wild dreams that I have, but maybe someday we'll even be able to pay ourselves. And that would be amazing. But until then, it all gets reinvested in the business, and that means that you're helping to support anarchist, feminist, vegan, radical media, which is super cool.
Yes.
And I want to say a special thank you to Vanessa. We've been getting a lot of messages through Patreon when people sign up, which is really fun. It's always nice to hear directly from someone. And part of Vanessa's message says, I owe my transition from vegetarian to vegan all to you.
Aww.
Which I thought was super cool.
Yeah.
And I really like it because on this show, we talk a lot about activism and different ways to be an activist. And we also talk a lot about, just dealing with how... Yeah, we just did our episode about being angry women, which we got really good feedback on. So thank you, everyone. It seemed like that resonated for a lot of people. But, like what we do, we hear back, we get bad reviews, or we hear from people that our brand of veganism is toxic and it's not helpful and it's hurting the movement. And then I even had... I had my post-holiday work party last night, which for those of you listening will be a few nights ago. But I got into a whole thing because this one person knew my political beliefs and decided that that was a good time to just tear into me and, all the typical stuff people do where they're just questioning everything and then telling you you're naive and blah, blah, blah. I had someone else kind of nag me about the show. And if you don't know what nagging is, it's when you tell someone you're attracted to bad things, you put them down to make them think that your value is high and make them try to work for your approval. Side note, this does not work on me.
Yeah, not a good tactic.
No. And be aware of it because hopefully it doesn't work on you either. But anyway, just there were digs about the show and just a lot of stuff came out just from these normies that I work with, and it's easy to sometimes doubt yourself. And so it's just cool to see that like what we do works. We've gotten a lot of messages from people saying we help them transition either from full omnivore, which I'm still always amazed that people listen to us who aren't vegan. And I think it's amazing and wonderful. But also a lot of people who've, finally were like, I really wanted to do it for a long time. And you finally helped me get to a place where I like was ready. So just to say that like finding your passion and being yourself and just doing what you do is the best way to be an activist, But what other people do that's very different from us also works. So just be yourself. It's just a good reminder. And also I wanted to lead in a little bit to, I know we've done a lot of work lately around talking about, obviously becoming more radical. We've been pushing people to kind of speak up and call things out and speak your mind. And we mean that. And I hope that we always kind of measure it with like, as you're able. But last night was a good example of a night where I needed to just be a fucking human and not be an activist. And then I got pulled into a lot of conversations that were extremely political against my will. And I was very drained and upset by it. And so I just want to say that, like, I just want to remind everyone that we are human and we always know, we understand the fatigue that happens too. And so it's always good to like push and say stuff when you can. But if you also find yourself in the middle of a conversation with someone who's just pushing your buttons to push your buttons and clearly is not interested in actually learning anything, it's okay to walk away from that. And it's okay to also just have a night where you just can't. And like last night, I just couldn't. And I ended up telling 2 different people, like, I can't do this with you right now because I just wanted to be a person at a party tonight. That's all I wanted. So just a gentle reminder that sometimes like it's okay to hit that wall where you're like, I really can't fucking tell you. I can't talk about right now why, like, can't argue. I can't like sit here and prove why feminism is valid, even though it quote unquote doesn't include men. I can't sit here and have someone talk down to me who is basically flat out telling me that I'm naive and ridiculous for having the views that I have. One person at one point said, "Thank God you're funny because otherwise you'd be the most annoying person I've ever met."
What the fuck?
Yeah. It got bad with one person.
Girl, he just like, my blood pressure just went up so high.
I know. We really needed to record this episode, so I haven't been able to tell Callie like all the details, but I'm like, girl, wait till we have fucking whiskey later because you're going to be lit. You're going to be like, where is he?
Yes. Well, I'm already feeling that way, so I can't even imagine.
Yeah. I also got fed cheese last night, and
The fuck?
whatever. It's not something that throws me into a tailspin. I guess.
But
it sucks.
Yeah.
And then it was actually someone else who noticed that it was even cheese, because it was this, they kind of like fried the cheese into a sheet. You know how they do with Daya, kind of?
Yeah.
Like at some of the places we go to, they kind of did that, and it was in this mushroom taco. So the thing was like very brown, and then the taco, the mushrooms were brown, and I just didn't like.
Oh.
And I wasn't thinking like, what is this? Because it looks like stuff I eat in vegan food.
Yeah.
So I just ate it, and the fucking mushroom taco was so good. But then they also brought me this zucchini cactus taco that wasn't very good, so I put it down. And then this woman that I work with like flipped it over, this little sheet, and you could see that it was cheese on the other side.
Oh.
And she's like, "Oh, I thought that was," she's like, "Did you just eat that?" And I was like, and like in front of all these people. I mean, she was like, she wasn't being bad about it, but then I was like,
but still, now it's like a thing.
yeah.
Oh, God.
And then that guy was standing next to me, and he goes, "Ha ha, we win."
Oh, my God, girl. I can't.
And I looked at him and I said, "Actually, Big Ag just won." And then he laughed, and then he was like, "Thank God you're funny, because otherwise you'd be the most annoying person I ever met." And I was like,
I really am not an advocate for violence, but I'm feeling very, like, violent right now.
very punchy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So anyway, I just wanted to say, and it also, I always try to use these experiences to also recognize my privilege, that I know that there are people out there that the way you look, how you present your gender, whatever, can open you up to this kind of stuff. And this just happens to me because people happen to know my politics. And just to acknowledge like how exhausting it is to be different in general, and just to give a lot of empathy and sympathy to people who like have to deal with this constantly because of their presentation. It was just really exhausting, and it just was very othering. It was like, okay, like a lot of times at work I feel like the like cute, quirky alternative girl, like I can tell that people are infantilizing me a little bit around my beliefs, but for the most part people are just like, she's just different. I'm like a breath of fresh air in a corporate environment. But it was a stark reminder that a lot of people do think I'm a dumb girl with these dumb beliefs, and I'm using that word like intentionally, and that they don't take me seriously, and it didn't feel good. It doesn't feel good at all. So anyway, that was my experience. But again, just to reiterate that, like, it's okay to just need a night off, and it's okay to like not be able to go there with someone. And I ended up, like I said, I ended up telling, especially someone else later in the night, I was like, I really just like need to be a person having fun tonight, And I was like, and I can't, like, if you're going to say stuff, bad stuff, like I'm going to have to say something. So can we just not, Can you let me just have my tequila and be cool? So yeah, just a reminder. I hope we try to have nuanced conversations, but I know a lot of people take what we say in very extreme, cases. And I just always want to remind people that, yes, we advocate for speaking up. We advocate for being political, but we always, always, always also advocate for self-care and for knowing your limits and it being okay sometimes when you need to just not. So Callie has a rant. Isn't this so exciting?
I know.
I love how proud of yourself you are.
Yeah.
And hers is also tied to work, which ties in nicely with what I just talked about and also with our main topic today.
Yeah,
so I was really excited about this.
Yeah, well, thank you. Also, I think it's related to, stuff that we talked about last week too. So I thought it'd be a nice way to kind of bridge maybe two topics that, even though they're not like exactly tied, I think it can show some connections. So as I mentioned a couple months ago, I got a new job. I was finally able to leave my like really shitty work situation, my corporate job for a very like conservative company with like not a good relationship with my boss. And I'm very happy about the new job I got. It's a very different opportunity. It has changed a lot of things about my life in great ways, but it reminded me that we so often don't really talk about the true cost of leaving jobs and getting new ones. And I was actually very lucky. I didn't have to go through the emotionally draining process of like doing my resume and putting my resume out there and applying for jobs and going on lots of different interviews and feeling like, you know, that rejection and the unknown and all that stuff. I actually was very fortunate that someone who, knows me, like reached out to me and said like, hey, I have an opportunity and I'd really like you to come work for me, which I was very touched and honored by. So I, one, got to save all of that emotional labor that usually goes into jobs. But I realized how classist and ableist our conversations usually are around people getting new jobs.
Yes, girl.
So one thing that I want to say that has been very apparent to me is that our jobs are a big part of our social life. They take up a lot of our time in our day, especially those of us who work in corporate environments. You know, we spend most of our like daylight hours with our coworkers. And even if they don't necessarily become our good friends, they do serve a big part of our overall socialization. And that is not a small thing. So when we talk about someone just leaving a bad job or leaving a job that doesn't pay very well to go to a different job, we don't really account for the social aspect of leaving a group of people that have become part of their social lives. So I want to say that. Also, as I mentioned last week, you know, the idea that someone should just leave a job because it doesn't pay very much, again, doesn't take into account the ableism or the classism involved in that, or the emotional labor that goes into like finding a new job and then going to work for a new company where you have to learn a bunch of stuff, which is emotionally draining. You have to meet new people, figure out new social structures. A lot of times that involves having to buy new clothes, different clothes.
I mean, if you're in a low-paying job, you may not be required to wear clothes. Like, say you go from a restaurant job to trying to get a corporate job to make more money, you may not have the wardrobe. And then what are you going to do? You can't move industries because you don't have the starting capital to buy the clothes you need to fit in. Yeah. And people like underestimate how crippling that is.
Well, yes, of course they do. I mean, I was so focused on how unhappy I was in my last job that I was just like, this is just a great thing. So I really severely underestimated how difficult a transition changing a job was. And I had worked at my last company almost 9 years. So it had been a really long time since I had gone through a job change. And my jobs before that, I was much younger. You know, I was a teen and into my very early 20s. So job changes were not that big of a deal before, you know, because I hadn't worked in them very long. and, you know, I had a lot less writing on it. But now, as an adult who lives on my own, has my own bills to pay, and things like a 401k and health insurance, it's not a small thing to transition jobs. And I just really, it makes me really angry now the more I see people talking about well, if you're not happy, just go get a different job. Or if you don't make enough money, just go get a different job. Or, oh, you don't like your industry? Go to school and then get a different job.
Oh my God.
It's such a small thing.
Okay, I'll just buy a house while I'm at it too.
Right?
Because that's accessible.
I mean, I am someone who has a lot of privilege in this, but this transition was emotionally draining, physically draining, in a lot of ways, financially draining. There was a period of time where there was a gap. Again, planned by me. I wanted to take a little time off between leaving my old job and transitioning to my new one. But still, usually when you start a new job, even if you don't take a break in between, there's usually a period of time before you get paid that you have to kind of go unpaid during that transition.
And they may have a different pay schedule.
Right.
I actually talked to someone last night who got promoted, who got hired from contractor to full time, and he was getting paid every week, and now he's getting paid every other week.
Yep.
And he's like, so that first
Yeah.
pay period where he doesn't get his paycheck, he's like, I have to like figure it out.
Yeah.
You know?
If I didn't have any savings, I would not have been able to do this. I didn't have benefits when I first started. And I know that's very normal. A lot of companies, you don't get benefits for your first 90 days, which is very standard. But it didn't really occur to me until I went through this process, like how difficult that would be for most people. You know, I was in pretty decent health, and besides getting, you know, a really bad cold during this break in benefits, I didn't really have anything immediate that came up that I needed to go see a doctor for. But if I had, that would have been really bad. Like I could have racked up medical bills that I wouldn't have been able to pay off, you know, with no insurance. If there was any kind of emergency, like that's a really big problem. If I was someone who had kids who like, I mean, there's all kinds
Or
of
a
reasons,
chronic condition
or a chronic
or
illness.
anything.
There's so many things that could have been
I dated
like
someone-
barriers to finding a new job.
I dated someone who makes incredible money, is very good at what he does, very highly sought after, especially in our area because there's a bit of a tech drought here, and he's a developer, a web developer. But he had a really hard time getting benefits anywhere because he has a heart condition. So he's kind of stuck, you know, like having his work provide benefits that cover him makes it harder for him to have, even though he has like a ton of privilege and, you know, clout, he's still like, that's still something that's very difficult for him and kind of minimizes his choices. You know, and that was really eye-opening for me because I hadn't really known someone with like a pre-existing kind of born with condition before. And I was like, fuck, I never even thought about that.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, it's really hard for me to get insurance because I have this pre-existing condition, which is so fucked up. And that could be a whole other tangent. But
Yeah.
I just wanted to back Kelly up because I'm, everyone knows that I have not been very happy in my new position, and even small things like I got moved from the firm level to the network level, and I technically sit in the same seat that I sat in before, but I feel extremely isolated. I'm working in a completely different culture. I'm working with people I don't know. I'm working with a lot of people remotely, so I have these people being rude to me, but like we're not even in the same room, so I can become a human to them. And then I'm not working with people that I knew well and had good relationships with, or were, you know, part of a bigger team, so we're not working as directly with each other. And even that, like even being in the same situation but having my job change was very hard emotionally for me. And that's part of why at the happy hour last night I just wanted to let loose, because I was finally in the same room with like a lot of my friends who sit on different floors I don't see very often, and just feeling like a bit of a person for once. But also I'm looking around and I found a really good opportunity that sounds almost perfect, but I don't have my resume updated, and I don't have my cover letter done, and I don't fucking have time. And now I have all this pressure on me because this is a great opportunity. It fits like a lot of stuff I was looking for, and I'm like, oh, if you miss out, that's your own fault. But like fucking ableism, like I don't have it, you know, and it's extremely stressful. And then when they want to do an interview, that's really hard for me. So just to back you up, it's not, and you and I both have a lot of privilege in this situation.
Right.
But it's not easy, even given all the privilege we have. And even the guy I had dated who had way more privilege than me, you know, he's a fucking white guy who did like a techie thing and made 6 figures for it. Even he had trouble with some stuff. So it's not a good thing to say to people. And I agree with you. It just puts me on 10.
Yeah. It's so upsetting to me that our society revolves so much around what we do, you know, that is fundamental to who we are and what we deserve in life, and that working is supposed to be the thing that gives our life meaning. And yet we can act that way, but then also at the same time, like downplay how critical a role our job is and our workplace and the relationship with our boss and our coworkers and the money we make and the commute. And there's just so many things that are involved in how we sell our labor and all the things that go along with that. And we just totally downplay it, you know? And
Absolutely.
Nicole and I have ranted about this before, but my last company, they would tell people all the time. My boss would sit down with me and be like, well, if you don't like it, then like find a different job. Or if employees are not like coming around to the culture change, then they can go somewhere else. Like it's just this easy thing to go somewhere else.
Told you my job has had a campaign for almost 2 years now of this: change is happening, change is inevitable, and if you don't like change, then maybe you don't belong here. Like, we only want people who are on board for change, and
like it's nothing.
Yeah. And they have this whole fucking boner about what's your why. That was actually one of our themes for our conference like 2 or 3 years ago. And it's like, what's your why? Why do you get out of bed? Like, why do you come here? And they're like, we want to hear beyond a paycheck. Like, why are you here? And it's like, how fucking privileged are you to think that every single person in this company can afford to have a why that's outside of a fucking paycheck?
Thank you.
Because guess what? Too costly for me. Because if I could afford to have a why, I would be doing it somewhere else.
That just smacks of abuse to me. Because it's that
Tell
way
me
of,
why you like this. Tell me why you're here.
Yeah, it's this thing of like, we know you don't really have any options, but we're going to make you put a smile on your face and tell us that you do.
Absolutely.
Like, that is
Which
a
is
thing
why-
that an abuser does to someone
Yes.
they're abusing. Of like, yeah, I'm putting you through all of this shit, but it's not enough that I'm just doing it to you. I also want you to have to like play along.
Which is why I always push that any unhappy office worker should not ever disrespect a sex worker, because I'm like, you show up every day, do things with your body you don't want to do. You have to put on an act and earn money. It's no different.
Yeah.
It's no different. Like, we're all selling something.
Yep.
And just because it comes down to sex, like, why is that vilified when you're fucking selling yourself too? Every time I'm there and I have to act a certain way, I feel that. I feel that I'm like selling like myself to be there and have a job.
Yeah. Selling a piece of me.
Yeah.
My
And at
personality.
least sex work, when, you know, done out of choice and like a good situation, can actually be very empowering and liberating. This is not. This is just fucking oppressive and abusive and, yeah, just infuriating. And then that's what you're told all the time. Like, oh, if you don't like it, then just leave. And you're like, to where? Like, how?
Yeah.
This place is sucking my soul dry, and you think I'm going to have all this energy to go fucking interview somewhere else where they're going to expect me to be on 10 in like a manic happy way and be like, I'm so excited about this opportunity. And also I've done all this research because they know you're going to ask me to ask you something about the company, and I need to demonstrate that I know all this stuff. I've read shit that is like, go watch interviews by management of the company and like read like all these investment articles. And I'm like, who has time for this?
For free, by the way.
For free.
So even though we're in a system that is
To
supposed
maybe
to
have
be,
a chance
yeah,
at a job.
Yep.
Which, by the way, none of the jobs I've looked up have salaries posted. That's just like not a thing anymore.
Yeah.
So you're going through all this too to like get someone to call you back to eventually somehow find out what the salary range is. So like right now, like I want to apply for this job. I have no idea that it's even actually worth it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing from what the work is and what the title is, but I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it's another one of them thinking like people should just want to work here. It's not about the money. It's like, that's the only reason any of us are fucking here.
Yeah.
Which leads really well into a UBI discussion.
Right? I was like, literally the industry I work for exists because of money.
Right.
Like, we literally, none of us would be here if we didn't have to be here because of money.
Yeah.
But yes, so as an alternative,
Yes.
or as a possible alternative that we'd like to discuss. Oh my God. So before we get into this, I forgot. At my work happy hour, my post-holiday party, excuse me, because now we celebrate the holidays after, because that's definitely when I want to celebrate them.
Well, it's
like
cheaper.
weeks after I've been like, okay, I made it through holiday season. It's done.
Yeah. They don't have to pay those holiday rates.
I know, but it's like...
I know. It's just so funny to me that companies are so fucking cheap. They're like, we're going to have a holiday party in January, so we don't have to pay the December rates.
In
You're
late
like,
January.
fucking cheap asses.
I know. But anyway, one of the things that man said to me was... Shit, how did this...
I can't even hear this right now. I'm just going to be so mad.
You're going to be really mad. But I was, going on some anti-capitalist rant because I was like, well, capitalism's the problem with all this anyway. And he's like, I don't think that that's true. And like, what would be... So he was like, okay, what's the alternative? You're going to be really pissed.
Oh, no.
I'm like afraid to even say this right now, actually. So he goes, what's the alternative? What's the solution? And I looked at him and I said, that's a very oppressive question to ask.
Yes, girl.
I said, there is no reason that I should have to have the solution to be able to talk about how there's a problem. And he's like, that was such a pussy answer.
Oh, no. Gosh.
He's like, that was such bullshit. Like, what a cop-out. He's like, you're a coward. And I was like...
Are you fucking serious?
I was like, you're being a fucking white, privileged, like, asshole right now. I said, and I couldn't even... Like, I didn't even jump on the misogyny because I was so pissed about just the, like, whole structure. I said, people like you sit back and you have your cynical little ideas and then you don't even... I said, I shouldn't have to know. How would I know that? How would I know what the solution is? I said, I'm researching things. I'm thinking about how I feel. But I don't know how any proposal is going to work in the real world. And then you're asking me, I said, then it becomes the conversation about if my proposed solution is reasonable or not. And we stop talking about the problem.
Damn, that was a good answer.
And he was like, that is such a cop-out.
Who is this fucking guy?
His name is... Just kidding.
Just kidding.
We
We don't out people.
No, not on air.
But I would love to wrangle myself an invitation to your next holiday happy hour.
It would be so funny if we were like, okay, like, we just walk in the room. We're like, who is it?
Right? Be like, I don't fucking work here, so
Yeah. Let's throw down. What do you want to talk about?
Yeah.
But anyway, my point is that I feel like having that conversation ties into our conversation today because we don't know that this is the answer necessarily, but we really like the philosophy behind it. We're going to share what we've learned and our thoughts about it. But I don't want this ever to derail the whole conversation around the fact that capitalism doesn't fucking work and everything we just talked about with jobs and everything else. Like, if you hear this and you don't agree, fine. I mean, question why you don't agree. Like, question why you don't agree and how that may or may not be continuing oppression. But like, and just to empower everyone, like, it's okay to not fucking know what the answer is. It does not mean that you don't deserve to be heard and taken seriously when you're talking about a fucking problem. I told him, I said, I didn't create the fucking problem. How am I supposed to solve it? I'm supposed to solve a problem of economy. Mm-hmm. I'm like, I don't fucking understand that shit. I don't even know how it works, but I know it's broken. I know this shit this shit is hurting people. I don't know.
Well, and you're so right in saying, your fucking answer was epic. Because it does, it shifts the focus away from like interrogating the person who's trying to like discuss the problem, right? Mm-hmm. And it's a very like usually white male privilege way of handling things where it's like, you now need to prove to me that you have anything valid to say, which is shitty and oppressive and privileged as fuck. But then also it's like, but now you're shifting away from all of the victims of the current system. Like, so many people are hurting from our current economy and the way it's being run and capitalism. And it's like, so you're telling me that, like, because I don't have the answer, all those people deserve to suffer. And by the way, what are you doing to solve the problem? You're not doing anything.
And that's
a lot of those
how-
people think that that there isn't anything to be done, that things are working great. So it's like, how is this about me not having the answer, or in your eyes being wrong, when you think it's okay for millions of people to go without food, shelter? Like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Suffering under like wage slavery. Like, get the fuck out of here.
I know.
You need to be explaining yourself to me, not the other way around.
Thank you. No, there's so much backstory here that I won't get into, but this person and I ended up like bonding initially because he seemed to also hold radical views. And then over time, it became apparent that it was all kind of like a thought exercise. Well, it started off, so our relationship started off by like, I don't even know how he found out about the show or like what our first conversation was, but he would then, like when he would see me, he's like, oh, how's the good fight going? And he's like, I'm so happy that like you still, it was like kind of condescending, like, oh, it's cute that you still think you can change things. He's like, I gave up on that long ago, which is annoying. But I was like, oh, but we have the same political beliefs. It's just that like he doesn't fight for them, which is like
a whole thing.
Yeah. But then over time, I don't know what's happened, but now he's like attacking me basically, and basically saying my views are like naive and childish. And like, so now that I don't have a solution to propose, you know, like like nothing I'm saying has merit. Because I was talking about capitalism. He's like, well, what else would we have? And I'm like, anything else. Like, what are you talking about? Like, literally
maybe not a
anything
system
else
that like lets millions of people suffer.
Right. And then I said, you know, anything based on a need for endless profit increase is inherently destructive. And he was like, ugh. He goes, profit increase? He's like, what about our company? Like, we didn't have a profit like 2 years ago. Like, why are we still here? Like, we didn't increase our profits. And I was like, so you're saying that I'm like, first of all, that's how capitalism works. It's not like I made that up. And second of all, like, so you're saying because one company got through like one bad year that disproves how capitalism is? He just is making so many like...
Also, didn't y'all just lay off a bunch of people?
Girl. Like, which time?
You're like, that's how... That is the answer.
Right.
That's how the company continued.
Like, you want to sit down and let me tell you about externalized costs and like all this other shit.
That's not even externalizing costs. That's like they literally laid people off to save themselves.
No, I was talking, another group of people I was talking to, we were talking about like how everyone in the company is doing like 2 jobs now.
Yeah.
Yes. But anyway, also, so I just want to say, I want to empower all of you to tell people that, or just to believe for yourself that like that expression, like, don't come to someone with a problem if you don't have a solution, is fucking bullshit. It's fucking oppressive fucking bullshit. And they want you to feel like you are doing something bad by pointing out a problem. So you have to be a good little doobie and like have something good to bring. Otherwise, like, you need to keep your mouth shut. There is nothing wrong with being someone who points out problems. Mm-hmm. Because most of the time, it isn't our fucking problem to fix. Again, what the fuck do I know about... Because he was like, oh, there's been beads that you could trade for things. Like, we've always had money. Because I got into an argument about how money was a construct anyway, and it's fucking fake. Just like time. And he's like, no, time exists. It's just relative. And I was like... It's fake. It's like all of, like, if we all died, there wouldn't be time anymore. If all humans were gone, it wouldn't be like some alien would come to Earth and be like, oh, it's been an hour. I need to have lunch. Like,
this happy hour has like layers to it. Like,
it got real deep. Yeah. And like heated. But what was he saying? Yeah, so anyway, I'm just like, how the fuck should I know? Yeah. I said my idea of a perfect world is when we go back to being nomadic tribes pre-agriculture. Obviously not going to happen. Also, I like my smartphone. I don't fucking know. I don't know how we fix this. And it's not up to me to fix it. My job, the job that I have signed up for, is to talk to people about why this is broken and that we need something better. Mm-hmm. So that people smarter than me in these areas... people who know better can go do their fucking thing and come up with a solution, and that all of us collectively can say, yes, we need better, and have more of an input on what that better thing is, because none of us fucking chose this. Not a one of us. None of us chose this. So I just can't. And if someone tells you that, I think even at work, I think it's bullshit. You're telling me I can't go to my boss and say, yo, this project is fucked up and this is why, without knowing how to fix it? That's your fucking job. That's why you have an office and you get paid more than me. So goodbye. Go fix it. No. I shouldn't have to fix everything. God damn it. Talk about emotional labor. I'm sick of fixing all the things. I just want to be mad and pop off and drink tequila. Leave me alone.
Hashtag life goals.
So I broke him and the conversation, kind of to the point you're making before. Some other person that I actually like a lot drifted into this conversation, and his wife has been trying to go vegan for a few years now. So he always like talks to me and he's like, oh, my wife is more vegan than ever. Like she's like, you know, he's like, it's slow, but she's like constantly like really always focused on it and trying more and more. And I was like, that's great. And then he, you know, we talked a little bit about like animal agriculture or whatever, and he just looked at me and he was like, you know, he's like, sometimes, because he was talking about how he's like, yeah, so I eat vegan with her. Like, he's very supportive of it, but he also just kind of still does his own thing. He's reduced his meat consumption, but he still like eats meat and stuff. So he's like, yeah, you know, just being very lackadaisical about it. And then he just looked at me, he like stopped and was like, you know, sometimes I wonder if it's worse to know and not do anything than to not know. Which is your whole thing. I was like, Callie.
Yeah.
And I said, you know, I think it is, honestly, because when you know and you're not doing anything, then you're signing off on it.
Yeah.
And I said, you know, it's like MLK who talked about the white moderate and how that is really the most dangerous person is the white moderate. And this fucking other guy lost his shit. He was like, no, that was way out of fucking line. Like, that was ridiculous. I can't even believe you would say that. I'm like, first of all, Martin Luther King Jr. said it.
Right.
And I think he maybe kind of knew what he was talking about. He's sort of a big deal.
Right. Are you serious?
Yeah.
He flew off the handle
Yes.
because you said that?
Yes. Because they attacked his little white fragility. Right?
You're like, you're gonna, that is,
I was like, oh, there it is.
It is literally the week of Martin Luther King Jr. Day.
Girl.
This is where you're drawing the line. Are you fucking serious? It's like second to the I Have a Dream speech. The letter from Birmingham jail is like the like right up there. It's like the second most famous thing. It's like been memed like all over the fucking place all week.
Yep.
And this fucking guy like never heard it before.
Yeah.
I have to know what else he said.
Yeah, he was like, you're way out of line. Like, how could you possibly say that? And I was like, because the moderate, the people who know but don't do anything, are the fucking majority.
Right.
The bad people, quote unquote, that are doing the quote unquote bad things are not the majority. They're a smaller group of people, but it's the people who know and just don't care enough to do something about it are the ones that actually enable this stuff. Yeah. I said, this is how Trump got fucking elected, right? It was people, a lot of people who were like, oh, I know he's saying bad things, but like also for whatever reason, I think he's the best shot we have. And I don't think he really means it. It's like the people who weren't taking racism seriously. It's like all the fucking white women who overlooked all these sexual assault stuff because they're like, oh, I think it was a misunderstanding or whatever. I'm like, this is how we get into these fucking positions.
That's your white woman voice.
Yes. That's my Becky voice.
Yeah.
I love how I
hilarious.
need a different voice for white women than my own voice.
Right.
But I was like, this is that is the most dangerous people because those are the most powerful people, because those are the people, if they just fucking cared enough to do anything, would actually change everything.
Right.
And he's like, well, I kid you not.
Oh, no. Girl, you should have warned me before this episode. We should have, like, gotten the whiskey out, or...
I mean, we can get it out now.
I would have, like, seriously braced myself for all.
Well, I didn't plan to talk about all this, but I was like,
know.
oh, this is actually very relevant. He said, well, you know, there's an island, and I forget where because I'm so bad at geography, y'all. I hate being a fucking stereotype, but, like, I don't know where anything is, not even in the United States. Like, the Dakotas, I don't know.
Yeah.
They could be anywhere. I literally don't know.
Yeah, same.
It's like something I'm very insecure about, but I also haven't, like, taken the initiative to figure it out. He said there's this tribe of people on this island, and all they do all day every day is create art. And I looked at him and I literally said, what the fuck did that have to do with what we were talking about? And he looked at me and he realized, and he was like, I don't know. But it was like his like white fragility. He had just gotten to the point where he was like, oh yeah, fact, random fact I pulled out of my brain. What now? Like, he just couldn't, like, he had nothing else to say.
Oh my God. That is all.
Ooh. So anyway.
So good.
Point being, I agree. It's the people who, like, just don't feel moved to do something, or, like, don't feel like it impacts them, or don't fully understand, so they just don't care. It's like, these are the people who are actually the ones, maybe not causing it, but causing it to continue, and that's what I told him too. I'm like, okay, so maybe the nice white moderates aren't the ones who created slavery, but they surely let it continue. They surely enabled it to become part of the economy, right?
Yeah.
They're the ones who are purchasing the fucking goods made from it. So...
yeah, the line that they are more committed to peace than they are to justice is, I think, like, one of the most powerful ideas that you can truly internalize. Because when you really understand that, like, the vast majority of our society is more committed to, like, peace and just not being disrupted than they are to, like, true justice and equality. Like, you really realize that the stumbling block is not the small group of radical fucking far right wing KKK members. They do cause problems and cause a lot of harm, obviously, but they're not the ones. But they wouldn't have
any power,
right,
if all the other people were like, not gonna happen, not cool.
Right.
We don't agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm highly entertained by your stories, as always. And I think it does fit really well with what we're going to be talking about today, because, every time you and I bring up the economy and capitalism, and, less frequently when we talk about universal basic income, we always get comments and pushback from people that are like, oh yeah, what are you suggesting? And it's like, I don't fucking know.
Yeah.
Like, I have ideas of what we think would be a better option, but people expect that you have, like, you have to have everything figured out, every detail figured out before you can try to suggest any sort of change. So yeah. I'm glad that you brought that up and made the point going into this main segment now that, like, look, this is the start of a conversation, Yeah.
Yeah.
We are not economists. Most of our listeners are, I'm guessing, not economists. Maybe some
Probably
of y'all
some
are.
of them are.
Maybe some of them.
We have some very bougie listeners.
Yeah, very smart, intelligent folks.
Yeah.
But that doesn't, even economists, like, don't all agree on how, a universal basic income would work. There's lots of different ideas about how to implement it. So are we ready to get into this?
We're ready.
Okay. So what we're talking about today, as we've mentioned, is a universal basic income, or UBI, as I like to abbreviate it, because that can be a mouthful to say over and over. And just a quick overview of what universal basic income is. So a UBI is, think of it more, we're going to be tackling it today from more of like it's an ideology and less of like it's an exact thing that always looks the same. I'll kind of discuss some of the ways it's a little bit different, but in general, we want to say that it's an ideology that says every person would be given an amount to live off of by the government that is standard. So it's like basically think of it as like a bare minimum living wage. Like every person in the country would make, say, a flat rate minimum of 30 grand, say, just pulling a number completely out of thin air to live off of. That is what a universal basic income is. Now, some of the reasons this is talked about, or ways that this is being pitched, and obviously we'll get more into facts later and our ideas on it specifically, but a lot of reasons it's being talked about is because we all know that welfare programs are really struggling, and there's this whole idea of universal health care and how to implement that. We've got food stamps programs, we've got WIC, we've got job assistance programs. There's so many things out there: Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, retirement. There's all of these programs out there that need funding. And how much do we fund them? How much do people get? How do we keep up with inflation? There's all of these problems right now because welfare is clearly not helping all of the people it should be helping, and it's broken. We really don't know how to fix it. So a universal basic income is this idea that would say, instead of having all of these little programs going on where we're picking and choosing who can participate in them and how much to put towards it, a UBI would say, look, we believe every person has the right to live, have food, and shelter. Right? So we, the people, we, the government, are going to say every person deserves a basic, decent standard of living. Mm-hmm. So it would kind of take over for welfare programs like food stamps and Medicare and Medicaid and universal health care and Social Security and all that stuff. Basically, all of those other programs could kind of go away and a UBI would replace it.
Yes.
So there's been lots of different ideas over the years. This is actually, I read a lot of articles in doing research for this episode that people are saying that 2018 is the year that UBI is going to become actually a part of public discourse in the United States.
Oh, wow.
It's gaining so much traction and popularity that people on the left and the right actually like it for very different reasons. But that it is gaining in popularity, and that more and more normal citizens are starting to understand what it is and maybe get on board with why it's important. Previous generations were very concerned about communism. So anything like this was treated with a lot of hostility and distrust. And now I think in large part because of millennials and the type of conversations we're having in politics about socialism and healthcare, and that, I don't know, people shouldn't need to starve to death when we have so much excess at our fingertips. Just an idea.
It's wild.
So, lest you think that this is something new, it actually has been talked about for hundreds of years.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that long.
Yeah, it's been talked about in many different forms for a very long time. So, and like I said, it's surprising that people on both the left and right side of the political spectrum have talked about it for different reasons. I think a lot of why the right talks about it is because it just simplifies what they call entitlement programs. There's still obviously a lot of hatred towards poor people on the right, so I don't want to give them too much credit.
Never.
Because I think, or any. because, I think that they obviously would not necessarily implement it in the same way like I would like to see it implemented. They're usually not even about a living wage.
No.
The fight for 15 is still happening in the United States, which I do not even think is a living wage.
It's not.
And we can't even agree on $15 an hour.
Has anyone looked at fucking rental rates in every single city and every single area of the country?
Yeah.
Like, how are you supposed to make $15 an hour and live anywhere?
Yeah. So there's been a couple different ideas with a universal basic income. One is that every citizen gets it. Like every person gets it. It's a flat amount. And then anything that they earn on top of that is just on top of it. Another school of thought is that people that are over a certain income threshold don't get a universal basic income. I am of the group that says I think everyone should just get it. I think when you start looking at this was kind of the difference, a key difference between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton in the 2016 primaries was that Bernie Sanders was really pro-universal college education, and Hillary Clinton said she was. That was relatively new for her. But also that she didn't think the benefit should go to everyone. Like if families made over a certain threshold, then they shouldn't get it. I think what that causes is that it doesn't really change how much things cost. And I think that's something that's not really understood very well, is that if you still have healthcare or college education based on like how much people make, then you're still not really addressing the fact that these things cost way more than they should, because schools and hospitals and healthcare providers know that they can charge more for it. Whereas I think a universal basic income is kind of a great equalizer. And in my opinion, I think every citizen should make a certain dollar amount a year from the government. The important thing to understand about universal basic income is there's no strings attached. So unlike, again, conservatives / Republicans and people on the right, where they think you need to earn your right to have money, even like free money, I
just like can't do it.
Yeah, like they think that there should be strings attached. Like a lot of conservative politicians think that to get food stamps or welfare, you should have to drug test, or to be on unemployment benefits, you should have to prove that you're applying for jobs.
Are we gonna drug test fucking cokehead brokers,
CEOs? Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Clearly not.
Oh my God. Well, I forgot. Poor people are babies.
Right.
Who need, mommy and daddy to tell them what to do because they can't manage their own lives.
Which we'll definitely get to that later.
Oh, yes.
I have a great story about that.
Good. I want to hear it. Yeah, I just want to say I back you up, and I agree. It should just be a right as a citizen that is what you get. And also, everything you said, and also just saying, having experienced this in my own life many times, these when you say it's only above or below a certain amount, that amount is so arbitrary. Usually it's way too low. So usually, the people who qualify, there's so many people above that line who still
the poverty line,
the poverty line.
Right.
And also, even when you're well above it, it just doesn't take into account you just don't know. Maybe you were sick and you have debt from that, or you went to an expensive school and you have debt. You have a situation. It just doesn't really, it's not like a real world thing. You can't actually say that people above a certain line are fine and don't need assistance. That happened to me. I needed help when I was a kid, but I was above the poverty line, so I got nothing. But it was okay, just because I make some more money than this arbitrary number doesn't mean that I can afford groceries, because I can't. And maybe I could have I lived alone in a hotel room. Like I've talked about, used to rent off-season hotel rooms. So maybe I could have gone somewhere where I just had a bed in a room and shared like housing with all these other people, you know, and we had like shared like kitchen and bathroom and all this stuff. But like that didn't feel safe to me. And as an introvert, that's not something I wanted to do. And, you know, but like someone else would tell me like my problem was I was living above my means, not that I didn't have enough means.
Oh my God.
And so when I hear this, I just think that this is another way to perpetrate the same fucking problem. Mm-hmm. Like if we have these cutoffs for things, and there's always going to be people suffering on the other side of that line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that. Because I think it simplifies things too.
Yeah, it makes it easier.
Yeah. Because then you're just going to open up to like arguments about like what is the line and all kinds of shit. And it's like, no, like we should just figure out what the cost of living is for someone to be able to have a roof over their head, a decent roof over their head.
Thank you.
Like, okay, I love how when I see like memes and like pictures and stuff where people have made graphics about like what it costs to rent like a 1-bedroom apartment, mm-hmm. like what you have to make in that state to like be able to afford a 1-bedroom. I like that that's the standard, because we shouldn't say that like, well, yeah, you can live off of this, but you need to be like renting a room with like 5 other people. Like mm-hmm. that is not, like that should not be our standard of living. Like grown adults should be able to afford to live on their own, pay for the roof over their head, pay for food, healthcare, like all of that. Like that should be the standard. So, want to get into some reasons why, people like the idea of a universal basic income. Obviously, if you have listened to this show before, you know that Nicole and I are very anti-capitalism. We're anti-money. We're very anti the idea of poverty. Like, I mean, just ethically, there's a lot of economic reasons why a universal basic income makes sense, and I'll get into that, but I can't in good conscience even discuss any facts without stating that like those don't even matter to me. Like it doesn't even matter that UBI actually saves money, or that like giving money to poor people actually costs less money than the way in which our system oppresses poor people. So
yes,
we just have to say that like every person who is alive deserves a life not in poverty. Like no one should ever be food insecure or go hungry. No one should ever be homeless. Like our society has the means to care for people. And what the fuck are we doing with our society if we think that some people are just not worth caring for, that they're just disposable? Like I am not down with that in any way. So I would be pro universal basic income, even if it didn't make financial sense. I would argue we need to like figure it the fuck out, because it's not ethical to let people starve to death or like sleep out in the cold and die of like exposure to weather.
Yes, girl.
Right?
Yes.
It's like I was reading all these facts that were so incredibly powerful, but then part of me was just like, I even hate having to even say them,
mm-hmm.
you know?
Oh, I know.
Because like it shouldn't matter, but I know like people need to like see how it makes sense.
Well, they need the logical argument backed up with the hard facts, Callie.
But we just couldn't start this conversation without saying that, mm-hmm. that like we just truly believe that everybody deserves to be like, have a fair shot. Have a life. Yeah.
Like fucking Clinton wants to talk about people's, you know, potential. But it's like, this is how we allow our citizens to reach full potential. All of them.
Yeah.
Is by letting them all have a guaranteed life.
Right.
Where their needs are met.
Right.
Where they can focus on whatever makes them, you know, special, whatever they have to contribute to society, mm-hmm. without being fucking afraid.
Yep.
I was just, little personal tidbit before we get into the facts. Like I had a very, very emotional therapy session this week where I have not been really talking about my chronic illness because it's been too big and scary to really get into, like how I really feel and the ways that it impacts my life. And, I was telling her that some of the hardest part of it is that I probably spent about 30 to 32 years of my life just trying to financially survive, as well as like emotionally survive, you know, my childhood and then an abusive relationship I was in. And then I got to the point where my body now, like I'm having to try to survive in this different like physical way where I have to like get up and go to work and like take care of myself. And, you know, like it's like a physical manifestation of this kind of figurative survival I had to do. And in all of that, I just told her, I'm like, I just feel like there's so much more I could have given to myself and the world if my entire life basically hadn't been this struggle. And I just want that for other people.
Yeah.
You know, because we're going to still have people who are sick. We're still going to have other things we need to figure out. But if we can at least guarantee people you're going to have somewhere to live and something to eat, and you're going to have medical care when you need it, then we could have so many people who, if nothing else, can just live their fucking lives. I don't think you have to like do anything important to deserve that.
Right.
But like, how many people like me could have done so much more, you know? And I've always cared about other people, and I've always wanted to make things better. And I could have been using all of this fucking on 10 energy that you hear every week. I could have been using that my entire life to do things.
And creativity. And I mean, how many people could have like cured cancer, but like didn't, like you're saying,
or
I don't want to
causing it, helped us stop causing it.
I don't want to like downplay the fact that like we shouldn't just do things because we're expecting greatness from people. Like just living good lives should be enough. But seriously, how many people like could we have had the next like Beethoven or like Einstein out there, and there were just barriers to them, like because they were just trying to survive in a system that like devalues life so much.
Absolutely.
You know? Yeah. And on that note, with like people having passions or being the next great person.
Fill in the blank.
Yeah. Fill in the blank. The next great person who could change the world is this idea. And I talk about this a lot. Like, you know, our system has been so geared towards, we're seeing a shift right now where people are like, say, going to college and they're taking majors and they're taking classes and getting degrees and things based on what will earn them money, what will provide them a good standard of living. And we're losing out on artists and people who are being creative and caretakers for children and the elderly. I mean, there's so much more that goes into a well-functioning society that is more than just a degree that's going to earn a corporation money and like help them make profit, right? Yeah. And I see these conversations so much where, you know, you're talking to coworkers and people talk about like, oh, like, well, if I could have picked anything, I would have been at this, but, you know, there's no money in that, so I had to go into this instead. You know, like I really loved sociology when I was in college. I loved it. And literally all I heard was like, well, what are you going to do with a sociology degree? Mm-hmm. Like be a professor? Like that's about it. You know, there were so many things I was interested in that I couldn't pursue. Nicole, you really wanted to be a writer. And
I've been writing since I could write.
And got dissuaded from it because there's no money in writing.
Yeah.
You know, there's no money in journalism right now. We're like losing journalists. Like there's so many industries, so many paths that are just like crumbling because there's no corporate profit in it. That could go away with the universal basic income. Can you imagine if people could follow their dreams and know that like they didn't have to sell their time to something that they didn't care about? Like be an artist or have a podcast or contribute to the world in some incredible way that like benefits society but doesn't necessarily earn society money. We'd be so much better off.
Yeah. Or come together. Like we have problems we need to solve, and we can't solve them if we're not giving everyone the opportunity to give a shit and then come together to fix them. Like we have huge issues with our food beyond the fucking obviously broken food system. We have, soil that's depleted. We have we're growing crops from seeds that have been modified so many fucking times that they don't have the nutrients they used to. They don't grow the way they're supposed to. Was it you I was with? I read or saw somewhere recently that like the toxins in our environment, I forget, they like mentioned specific ones, but like basically at this point, we all have. So, oh my God, no, it was a show I was watching. It was how they dated something because they were like, food after this date, all of it contains this chemical or whatever it was because of the, I think it might have been the bombs in Japan. It was some event like that. Yeah. So I was like, that's fucking, like our entire planet now has been exposed. You know what I mean? So like we need to fix the food itself. Needs to be fixed. It's not as nutritious as it should be, and it has shit in it that it shouldn't have in it. And so if we could give the entire world an equal starting place and be cared for, and to have the mentality that we're all in this together and that everyone fucking matters and that we're a community, we could fix this stuff. We could find the minds that are able to fix it and bring them together. And then we wouldn't have these questions about like, well, how are we going to make a profit off of this? Or how are we, if we do this and we're going to stop making profits over here, we could get away from that.
Right. Another area that is not talked about very much, which is in my mind a huge incentive for something like a UBI, is childcare. Like we vastly underrate how beneficial it is, like raising children. There are so many like quote unquote stay-at-home moms who their labor is not valued at all. That doesn't earn any money. Oh my God, yes. And raising the next generation, no matter who you are, what gender you are, is incredibly important. And yet we devalue it. There's, you know what I mean? And people are not able to make a decision to stay home and raise their kids because they have to work. Can you imagine if it was like, you all get a standard living. Like you can afford to buy food and have shelter without having to like necessarily go out and get a different job. Like what we could cultivate in the upcoming generation would be incredible. And it would send the message to these people that, yes, it is incredibly important that you're raising children. Yeah. We need people to go out and produce, but we also need people to create, to teach, to care for. Those all should be equally important. And you don't have a well-functioning society without all of those aspects. And right now we're skewing so heavy into just like funneling all of our time and attention and putting all of the priority on like corporate profits and producing money, making money. What are we going to be left with? Nothing. A society is multifaceted. I know I keep bringing this up, but like art and music and all of these things are what actually make a society a society.
Mm-hmm. That's the mark of civilization.
Right. So moving more into the pragmatic justifications for UBI. I mean, I feel like right there we could stop the show and hopefully people will be like, yeah, I get it. But we have some facts and figures for you doubters out there, people we haven't quite sold yet. So the first is right now, automation and like robotics are growing at tremendous rates. And frankly, a lot of the world's top like billionaires and business people are actually some of the ones that are leading the conversations on a universal basic income. Like Elon Musk is one of them, because they see the writing on the wall. And that writing says that 47% of jobs are at a high risk of computerization. That comes out of an Oxford study. 47% of jobs. So in the next couple of decades, like half of our jobs, if not more, because Nicole shared with me a while back this really incredible TED Talk.
I did?
Yes, you did. It was a guest speaker that your company had hired to come in. And one of the things he had talked about was that humans are not very good about predicting how quickly technology grows. We always like underestimate the impact and the timeline.
And the ways in which it changes like how we do everything.
Right. So this figure of the 47%, like that could even be, it could be way more than that, you know? So I hear a lot, this is why I get so frustrated whenever there's like elections coming up, especially presidential elections, because everybody talks so much about, oh, jobs and manufacturing jobs and like coal miner jobs and the working poor, which really they just mean the working white poor. I don't know why they think that white people are the only people who are in these kind of jobs. Anyway, that's a subject for a different day.
Yeah.
But these jobs are going away. They're never coming back. And not only that, but we are going to lose thousands more in all different types of industries. I mean, industries that they thought would be relatively protected from the increase in automation, like service jobs. Like they thought, oh, like, yeah, we can get robots to do like manufacturing type stuff, but like service jobs and all. No, like service jobs, doctors, lawyers, accountants, like professional services type jobs too, not just like customer service type jobs. Those are all under threat of being like largely downsized, if not outsourced completely to automation. So what the fuck are we going to do when we expect people to have to earn a right to live, earn food, and earn shelter when there are no jobs?
Right.
A universal basic income would solve that problem.
And also, I think we mentioned this, and we were trying to figure it out before. I think we mentioned this in a recent episode, but it's also the idea that like we should change our mindset as a culture that when we have a technology advance that frees up time that can handle jobs, instead of laying people off, why aren't we redistributing that time to everybody?
My God, that's such a good point.
Right?
Yes.
Like why is it acceptable to us that when a technology comes out that reduces labor needs, that the solution is for companies to cut people and replace them with machines and then continue to make more profits versus letting the people who work for them work less for the same pay and have more time off?
Yeah. Why we won't even reassess what full-time hours are in this country.
No.
You know?
Which is ridiculous.
It's like, well, if automation is freeing up...
why can't 20 hours become full-time?
Right. There are other,
10.
I think there was a country, I'm forgetting which one it was, in Western Europe that was starting to look at doing like 6-hour work days and doing like job sharing where people were still labeled full-time but weren't actually doing like the full 40 hours because they knew how much jobs were starting to demand less and less time with the increase in automation. And so they were letting people like, they were saying like, well, that is not full time anymore. Like you can be full time and work less, or you can have job sharing. Like, you know, you each do a job, but you're only working like half days. Those sorts of things.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I don't know why we're so upset by the idea of automation like taking over our jobs. It's like most of the jobs that automation takes over are jobs people don't want to be doing. They're like lower end jobs, lower pay. Not all of them. Like I said, there's a lot of professional services that are under threat too. But yeah, why are we not cheering that on? Like, let's let the robots do the shitty jobs so that we like have more free time.
Yeah, why don't we change what happens with that to be a benefit to all of society, because now everyone has reduced, you know, is still able to make an income, but now gets to work less. Right. Like, shouldn't that be how technological advances happen?
Yeah, they should make
that they
life
benefit
better.
Everybody and not just the fucking corporations yet again.
Yep. Yep. Unless you say that, I'll get more into the financial stuff get more into it later as well. But I just want to say, too, that there's this idea that, like, if robots and automation are able to replace workers, I mean, you hear this all the time in corporate environments, but operational costs are usually the most expensive expense in a corporate environment. And operational costs are largely made up of people. Like, it costs a lot of money to hire people, right? And pay them their salaries and the benefits that go along with salaries. So if these companies, and that's why people are usually the first to go. Like, if there's an advancement in technology, a company will lay off people because they're the most expensive operational costs, so that they can, like, bring in technology that replaces that labor for cheaper, which now means that the company is, what this should means is that the company is able to lower the cost of its goods. Mm-hmm. Because it's costing them less to produce it because they're using technology instead of people, which again costs more. So we should be looking at, if companies are able to outsource our jobs to technology, then as a society, we should be getting a universal basic income. Let's let the profits generated by low operational costs, like, go towards the collective benefit, right?
Yes.
Because now the company is making profits with very extremely low costs, which just means more profit. Mm-hmm. So if a company produces a widget that costs $100 and they have to 80 of the $100 goes to operational costs, like paying salaries and paying for the good to be produced and all of those other stuff. And now you can get a computer that produces that widget for $10. The company is now, instead of making 20, they're making 90. So tax the fuck out of the $90 and give it to the people.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
So I just think people that think UBI is like pie in the sky and unrealistic, I just look at them and say, like, what do you think we're going to do when automation, like, gets rid of at least half of our jobs, if not more? And what are you proposing as a solution to that?
That will definitely happen. Because I feel like you could hear that and be like, well, maybe we just shouldn't develop those technologies. Right?
Yes.
But it will definitely happen because we live in a capitalist economy where endless profit is required, like endless increase in profit is required. So there's no way to stop these corporations from automating because they know that that will increase their profits dramatically.
Yeah, they're fucking
There's no
greedy.
stopping it.
Of course they're going to want to always find the cheapest way to produce whatever they're doing.
So it's going to happen. And yeah, people who talk about things that are unrealistic but are pro-capitalism, I'm like, do you know what the word realistic means? Like, I don't understand how you think that this is sustainable in any way. Like, shit is happening. The oceans are going to be dead. Robots will be doing everyone's job. There's going to be like 3 corporations that own everything and are just these evil empires. Like, what are you talking about?
I love how it just got like blown way fuck out into like massive.
I always have to go sci-fi level.
I love it.
Epic.
I love it.
But really.
Yeah, for reals. So some other stats about money, just to fucking get you
Light
on
me up.
20, yes, is as I mentioned in last week's episode, CEOs of the top corporations in the United States earn 271 times the rate of the typical worker. So are you telling me with profits up at that obscene level, like, can't be redistributed to pay for a UBI? Come on.
Come on.
Also, an economist recently estimated that it would cost $175 billion to eradicate poverty in the United States, which sounds like a lot of money. And please forgive me, I don't know what methods he was actually talking about to get rid of poverty in the United States. That was just his figure to eradicate poverty. But that is only a quarter of our military budget. So people talk about how we don't have any money and how we're in a deficit, and yet for a quarter, 25% of what we spend on just our military defense budget, we could eradicate poverty tomorrow.
You mean our killing people overseas budget?
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
So it's like, there's the money. People just, it's going towards the wrong things.
Absolutely. I wanted to chime in just to also point out that, and to tie it into veganism a little bit, from Metanomics, if you haven't read it, I really recommend that book. It's wonderful. That's when I hope they make a documentary, like a movie
that would
version.
Be a good one.
Yeah, it would be great because and it would work really well with all the graphics and stuff, you know, because it's so much numbers and things. So it could just be all these flashy, cartoony graphics on the screen.
Yeah.
But in a classy way, okay? I don't want to see any shitty graphics. Don't use clip art.
From the 80s.
From the 80s. Not naming any names, but anyway, that was snobby of me. I apologize. Okay. So anyway, Metanomics deals with the cost of, the meat and dairy industries. A lot of it talks about like externalized costs, which, we've been ranting about for at least 2 episodes now. But it also talks about tax subsidies and checkoff programs and things that I still don't fully understand. Like every time I read about it, it's still fascinating to me because it's like I get it, but then I walk away from it and I try to explain it to someone. I'm like, wait a minute, I have to look that up again.
Yeah.
But anyway, U.S. taxpayers, I'm pulling this from the Metanomics site, but U.S. taxpayers spend yearly to subsidize meat and dairy $38 billion. So right there, just thinking about this world where we stop subsidizing food. I've read even because we subsidize fruits and vegetables at 17 million, which I'm surprised. 17 million. And I think that got increased recently to like 30 something million.
Wait, 17 million
with
versus
an M,
34 billion.
38 billion with a B.
Oh.
But I've read that these subsidies hurt small farmers because they go to the big corporations. So they're not even helping small business anyway, which is like a whole side tangent. But if we were able to come together, as we spread veganism, get these subsidies to go away or get people to, get meat to stop being a thing, whatever, that's money we're freeing up. And then also I've read so many different things about wasted time at work because I hate the 40-hour work week, and everyone knows
yes, girl,
that wasted time is built into the 40-hour work week. Like everyone knows, like the people hiring you, the people running these companies, like, they're like, we know. I'm talking.
Yeah, they won't admit it, but they know.
Right. Like I'm talking really specifically for like corporate desk jobs. Like they fucking know you're on the internet. They know you're on your cell phone because no one can work for 8 hours a day straight. It's impossible. Your brain is not built for that. And a lot of what happens at work is not work. Like I'm in meetings all the time where we don't make a fucking decision. We're just like people talking in a room for an hour, like that's not like work. So I looked up a couple things and I couldn't find like, clean numbers, but someone estimated that they did some survey and found out like the average person's on their cell phone for like 56 minutes out of every workday, which I'm like, that's all.
People were lying.
People are lying. So, they say like they extrapolate it out, but like if every full-time worker in the U.S. is doing this, that would add up to 15.5 billion in lost productivity. There was another survey done where they found out like 89% of the people surveyed say that they waste time during the day, which is like obviously there's all kinds of things like theft. And, there's time theft.
Oh, God. Don't get me started.
And then there's like actual theft of like supplies and food and whatever. But there's just a lot of inherent waste built into how our full-time work week is right now. So there's, to me, a lot of money kind of in there that could just be shifted to this different program where it's like we're not losing anything because this was already being wasted. And it's like my friend Sarah manages a store, and she was telling me how like theft loss is built into their, like, they account for it. And I feel like that's what we do with time and productivity at these jobs. And so there's just a lot of money floating around. There's money that we could stop using to kill people with. There's money we could stop using to support the meat and dairy industries. There's money that people are just eating every year because they know people aren't working. So it's like, well, if you know, say, I would think that a 5-hour workday is ideal. I think that's the most that you can be productive. And I think when you have 5 hours and you know it's only 5 hours, you're like, okay, I'm going to get shit done and get out of here. Because anytime I've worked a day where I leave it about 5 hours, like right when I would take lunch, I like get shit done. And then I feel great. And I feel like I have my whole day ahead of me. So like if we accepted like, okay, a 5-hour workday is now full time, we're not losing money. We're not losing productivity because people are wasting. I would say people waste like 3 hours a day. I really think so. Like a lot of people waste like 2 to 3 hours a day, you know? So it's already there. We just need to accept it and just change our perception. Like we need to be okay with it.
Yeah.
But then they know we wouldn't be tired consumers seeking out all these products to make us feel better.
Well, that's the thing. They literally keep us at an 8-hour workday because they know that's like the optimum time to make people like just tired enough to be good consumers. Because, you know, you get off of work and after an 8-hour day plus like factor in time for commuting, like you're going to want to go out to dinner or like buy cocktails or, you know, whatever, like go shopping because you want to feel like you're getting some treat out of like the fact that your whole fucking day is mostly gone.
Happens to me.
So we spend more money.
Yeah. Part of the way I waste time at work is buying shit online.
I hate when I do that because then I'm sitting there thinking like, all I'm doing is making it so I can't leave this job. Like I've gotten used to a cost of living that means that like now I can't go make less money because I've just gotten so used to spending a certain amount to be happy.
That's how they get you.
Oof,
I'm the same way.
it's too real.
I know. It's way too real.
Yeah.
It is real. Real. But just to back up Callie's point here is that, you know, there's a lot to be said about a lot of costs that would go away by and I think we're going to get into that. So we'll prove that or talk about that further. But there's probably a lot of costs that would go away by allowing people to have a fucking healthy life. But there's just also a lot of fucking money out there that we're just spending on shit we don't need to be. And we could just redistribute it to be like, hey, instead of using this to do pointless things or to be wasted or to, you know, perpetuate violence, we could use this instead to better our society as a whole, to lift everybody up at the same time. And it sounds like a lot of money, but it's not that much money.
No.
When you're talking about a government and government spending, it's not that much money.
Well, and in terms of like, again, going back to the company example, like I remember seeing, at my last company, like they would waste money on things, like tremendous amounts of money. And then they would like argue over the smallest costs when it came to people.
Oh my
you know?
God. Yes.
Like we had these fucking ridiculous like tables that would go in all of like the people who had walls, like people who had offices. We called them, me and a couple of my friends from work, we called them bongo tables because they were these round circular, they were probably only like 3 feet maybe in diameter, and they were like circular. So they looked like solid wood, you know, those like little round like wood end tables. So these were in all of the offices. Like not very important that we have these in offices, right? Like most people don't need end tables at work. But it was just like an aesthetic thing. Well, it turns out, so one of my friends was making a point, and so he picked one up, and we found out they were like completely fucking hollow and like very light. And so that's why we started calling them bongo tables, because they were just the most like ridiculous. It was like you think it's this fancy piece of furniture and it's like this cheap hollow crap that is in every office. But then we found out that they were like $800 a piece.
Oh my God. I just had a physical reaction to that.
So every time...
I thought you were going to say like 200 or 300 and I was
no.
ready to be outraged.
No. So every time...
Yo, can we... Yes. Can we talk about the inflation that happens with corporate furniture?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And how that cost could go away?
Yep.
And corporate functions?
Mm-hmm.
Girl. Anyway, continue.
So every time we would hear like the higher ups like bitching about some like cost that they didn't want to have to pay, which we would be like, how many bongo tables would that be? Like we would always like we would joke about like how many bongo tables that would end up being, because like that's the kind of shit like corporations they waste so much money in certain ways and then they don't want to invest their money in the important things.
Right.
And our government, like our nationwide economy, a lot of the nation's economies are a lot like that. Like we waste just a shit ton of money on things that are not working right, and then we treat people like there's no money left and we can't afford to like give people food. This country, isn't it like 2/3 of food is thrown away?
I think it's at least 40%.
Okay.
I think it's a little more than that, but yeah, it's just enormous food waste.
Yeah, so we literally throw out like millions and millions of dollars of food, and that's built into the system.
Right.
Like food waste.
Right.
Just so our food can be pretty. Like you're telling me we can't maybe stop overproducing so much food and cutting back, or we can't give that food to people who are like don't have food? Like, come on, the money is there. We just need to shift it and be smarter.
Absolutely.
And speaking of that...
Ooh, good segue.
Thank you. I want to talk for a minute. Any kind of conversation about money, I think, is just incomplete if we don't talk about our fucked up mass incarceration in this country.
Oh my God. Talk about like the greatest externalized cost at like the greatest social destruction.
So if you haven't listened to our episodes, I believe it was 2 episodes together, like a series where we covered mass incarceration. I think it was earlier in 2017, if I'm remembering right. I highly, highly recommend that you go check those out. Also, I'm going to plug once again, if you have not seen the documentary 13th, you really need to watch that, because that will not only help you understand better institutionalized racism, but I think it also really helps educate you about money in this country. Like, I think indirectly it does that, you know?
Yeah, no, I agree.
Like, that's not one of the draws, I think, but so prisons, California spends 6 times more on prison inmates than college students. So you want to talk about where we're spending our money and what our priorities are. 6 times more on prison inmates than we do on college students. So a college student, the state of California spent, on average, it was about $8,600 a year, whereas they spend $50,000 on a prison inmate for 1 year. So we're spending $50,000 a person to lock them up, destroy their lives, and basically almost guarantee that they're going to end up back in prison. Like, we're not running good programs. It has been proven time and time again that when you have good education programs, when you, I don't even like the idea of prison, but there have been prisons that have focused more on like rehabilitation than like punitive. Like, we're just going to fucking lock you up and shame you for being a bad person. The recidivism rate that's the rate at which people go back into prison after they get out, is so much lower. It's like ludicrous how much lower it is when you treat these people
like humans
deserving of affection, and you help them get back on their feet instead of punishing them.
Well, and a lot of people... Well, first of all, a lot of people end up in prison because we've criminalized a lot of things that shouldn't be criminalized.
Yes, thank you.
Certain drugs and being poor, and having no house, which, again, UBI would solve 2 out of 3 of those. And then I would argue also the third one.
Right.
Because a lot of people sell drugs because they don't have any other fucking options. That's also why a lot of people get into prostitution, which I don't think should be criminalized in the first place. But also, a lot of people wouldn't have to do that, have to go to any of these things because they would have a living wage. But also, a lot of people end up, people who do kind of like truly, quote unquote, lose their way. A lot of times it's because, like, I grew up in some bad neighborhoods. I grew up in some underprivileged neighborhoods, and a lot of my friends, like, had things about them that were special or that they cared about, but they didn't have any avenue to explore it or expand on it or to feel like it was taken seriously. Like, I had friends who were very intelligent, but never were encouraged, and their teachers assumed that they weren't. And so they were kept in these very low-level classes, and then they weren't challenged, and they were also treated like fucking garbage. So they never became educated because they thought, why bother? And they also, a lot of them, like, internalized that they weren't smart when they were. So just shit like that. Like, a lot of people end up getting into situations because, for many reasons, but when you help people find something that they're good at or that they care about or that just gives them an outlet, it's so fucking empowering. And you can see someone, like, turn their life around because they realize that they have value. Mm-hmm. If you could give people the opportunity to try cooking and try art and, like, try mechanical work, like, just fucking let them be exposed to shit and see what lands, they're going to come out with a skill and just also with this sense of value that we're not giving people. Instead, we lock them up and strip any value that they may have felt away and tell them that you're, like, permanently marked as, like, a bad citizen.
Yeah, we make it incredibly hard to come back from that.
I mean,
we label them, we make them disclose it to employers, we don't help them get job training or, like, social assistance programs. A lot of people who go to prison are now ineligible for social assistance programs. So it's like,
how does that make sense?
They get out and we go, like, good fucking luck. Now things are even worse than before you went in.
Yeah.
Like, your lives are ruined. Try not to go back to prison.
Yeah.
How does that make any fucking sense?
Like, oh, if you were selling drugs or, participating in sex work before to make ends meet, we just made it harder. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, good luck not going back to that
for you
as
to
a
get,
survival
quote
technique.
unquote, like, legitimate income, right? We made it, like,
right.
that much harder for you to go get, like, a legitimate job.
Right.
I'm putting that in quotes.
Where, I have a board of fucking executives who are licking each other's assholes, but that's legal, so that's cool. Like, their salaries are legitimate. Mm-hmm. But you have someone who's just like, hey, this is what I have to sell. Like, I'm going to go do this to to fucking survive. And then we're like, you're a criminal. And now you're marked as that for the rest of your life. Even with like, the lack of what we provide people in prison. I mean, you hear so many stories of people who are like, oh yeah, like, I started reading for the first time because I had time and I had access to something. Like, even people, even in those shitty situations, like, a lot of them will find, or maybe not a lot of them, but people will find ways to, like, improve themselves. And they find, they'll read something and then get interested in something. And then suddenly they have this spark. So imagine if that's what we did instead, was we just gave them access to shit and encouraged that.
Yeah.
Like, why don't we have, I was saying to you before, why don't we have scholarship programs for criminals? Mm-hmm. Why don't we allow those people to come out and go to college and have a fucking chance at something?
Right. Instead, we make them ineligible.
Yeah, we take away their chance of everything. We make everything harder.
We take away their right to vote.
Oof, girl. I can't.
So, and I cannot take credit for this idea. I actually heard about this from Steph Zamorano on the show Aggressive Progressives, but she she was the one where I first heard this statistic about California spending 6 times more on prison than on college education. And she was like, can you imagine if instead of locking them up, like these people got out of jail and we were just like, here's $50,000. Don't break the law next year. Like, don't come back and here's 50 grand to set up your life. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
But no, we're spending that on incarcerating them and ruining their lives instead of taking the money and trying to actually help people get themselves out of situations that systemically they've been oppressed into.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Like, little side tangent for a minute, but like, so right now there's all of this discourse around like making marijuana legal, which I fully support, obviously. But there's all these big corporations now that are trying to get in the game for marijuana to sell it. When you've got
Get out of here.
you've got people that are still locked up in jail for selling weed. Like, you've got people, like the vast majority of people in prison are there for nonviolent offenses. Like, did y'all know that? Go listen to our mass incarceration episode.
Yeah, I was going to say, before anyone pops off about violent criminals, that's actually such a small percentage that, like, it's not even a conversation to be had.
Yeah.
We could definitely handle those people differently. Whatever. That's a conversation we could have as a community. I still think there needs to be room for... Like, even for those people, for a lot of cases, there should be some room for remediation, like making things whole again and giving that person some shot at somewhere to come back from. Mm-hmm. You know, that's what we don't give people. Yeah. We say you make one mistake, and a lot of times it's not a mistake. It's something you like fucking need to do to fucking live. Or you're just not shown anything different your entire life because you've grown up in this like, you know, with this historical oppression against you. And then we don't give them a way to come back. We don't give them a way to come back and be like a quote unquote upstanding citizen, which is that fucking phrase. So yeah, we just don't give people room. And because I think what we're getting into really at the like real reason for it is because we're making a profit off of them.
Yep.
And not us.
Right.
But corporations are.
Yep. Yeah. God, that was such a good point. Yeah, so we're profiting off of these people. We're not giving them any way to come back from. And my whole point about bringing up the marijuana and that being legalized is we've got millions of people locked up right now for nonviolent offenses. And yet now corporations are going to make profit off of this. Like, let all the fucking people out that are in jail for marijuana possession, first of all. And
thank you.
Take some of the money that you were paying towards, first of all, that you're going to earn by legalizing marijuana after you let it destroy countless lives, okay, and reinvest that in these people's businesses so that, like, weed dealer who was locked up for selling weed before it was legal, fucking create programs to give that person, get them out of jail and give them money, financial aid to help get an actual business going. I'm actually kind of impressed. I haven't done as much research as I want to about it, but it sounds like California, when we voted to legalize marijuana in last year's election, the November 2017 election, that there was actually stuff in there not just about legalizing marijuana, but about what to do with people that are in jail for marijuana convictions. So there, I think the last I read, there was like 1 million people that can now petition to have their sentences like lifted.
1 million?
Yeah.
That's fucking outrageous.
Yeah, so there, well, but the good thing is,
I mean,
that
just
we're
that many people are in for that is what I meant.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That
No,
there's
that's great.
Visions that all these people can now like have their sentences like wiped because marijuana is now legal. And I've also been reading that there's some cities that are trying to create programs that, because, you know, like local city governments and county governments are the ones that are like issuing business licenses for people to like sell marijuana. And so there are some cities that are trying to come up with programs that limit like how many licenses they'll give to like corporations and stuff, that they're trying to prioritize people who had prior convictions.
Oh,
because
I love that.
Like, especially the Black community have, as you'll see in 13th, has been like just destroyed by this like war on drugs, right? And so many of them have had,
and that was the actual intended purpose of it.
Yeah, that was the whole point. And so their lives have been ruined by this. And there are some cities that are like, we need to right this wrong. Like, if anyone's going to be profiting off of the now legal sale of marijuana, it needs to go to these people first. Like, we need to make right the damage that we've done, which I think is just incredible. But there needs to be a lot more of that. Anyway, so this is when we talk about there's not money out there for these things. Like, you want to tell me there's not money when we're spending $50,000 a year on locking people up when we're not investing in schools. In the last 30 years, California has built 20 new prisons and just 1 new college campus. So this is not a money shortage issue. This is a fucking priorities issue.
Yes. Yes, girl.
I'm like on a fucking roll today.
I love how you're wearing your Nope shirt, but I'm like, yes.
All right, y'all. Well, we had intended to do this in 1 episode, but as you know, we have lots to say, and we realized after recording almost 3.5 hours that this would probably be better split into 2 episodes.
You know.
So,
yeah.
We're going to go ahead and end here, and we will do a part 2 next week where we continue our conversation about universal basic income, and just really we get to the heart of like why we think it's okay that people are poor and don't have their needs met. Like, we just really talk about shifting our viewpoint as a society and realizing that like we all have a responsibility to come together and care for one another and, you know, make sure our needs are being met. Our like basic survival needs.
Yeah. Thank you.
Right. We'll talk to you next week.
Bye.